Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, looking at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Hello and welcome back. I'm your hostess, Kristen Hessler, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Amber Jones and Cindy Murray.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm the only one that doesn't have a problem with y'all's names, apparently.
Well, my name never changed,
Right.
so
I know, right?
mine hasn't changed in like 40-something years. No, 35 years.
You know, my name changes often. I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Amber and I, like every decade, we get a new name. No.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So, welcome back. If this is your, return visit, we appreciate you coming back. If it's your first time, we welcome you also. We're three gals just chatting away about random topics. And last week we had some silly topic, and the week before was a silly topic. And then we thought we'd throw in something a little bit more
Serious.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, I don't even know. We really enjoy discussing like the state of the mind and mental health, and we also have some segments on goal setting, and I think we've done a couple of different ones on mental health, and this week I wanted to take a deeper dive into PTSD and CPTSD, which is child PTSD. I think that we're becoming more aware of trauma and how it impacts our daily lives, and that everyone is impacted in some way. Everyone's trauma is different. Something that might not be considered traumatic to you could be devastating to someone else.
Yeah.
And Amber had a really good point about, the stigma behind PTSD. I think growing up, I agreed with you, Amber. You mentioned, like, it's not just for people who are veterans or, military.
Yeah.
I remember
we did
growing up and we associated that with the, Vietnam veterans.
Vietnam, Vietnam particularly, yeah.
Yeah. But now we're seeing, the things that occur to us in our lifetime, how,
Even as
those,
children,
as children, especially. I mean, it's really like, a kid falling off their bike that can be traumatic.
Trauma.
Yeah. And, just really like unwrapping like our lives as we like reflect on them and the different things that might cause us, we don't even know sometimes that we suffer from PTSD from something until it really like you start to dig.
Yeah.
We've talked about shadow
until it
work,
starts
manifesting
really know that
into
you've
something.
had trauma
affecting your life.
until it starts affecting your life.
I don't know if I ever mentioned on the podcast. I mean, I have a weird thing I've been dealing with for the past maybe like 8 years now. It's about 8 years where I have like this massive anxiety when I ride in a car as a passenger, to the point where like I prefer to sit in the back seat. It makes it a little bit challenging to do things like go on an airplane or go like on a ride through the mountains. I remember when we went on our little trip to Big Bend,
Yeah.
there's some elevation there, and there were some like really petrifying like turns going 20 miles an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Where I felt like
really
we were
freaked out.
just
Yeah.
like out of control. Like our vehicle was like fishtailing like NASCAR. Like that's the way it feels. It's out of control. And it's something I've been like really struggling with, and it comes and goes. And I think that it's, stemming from something, traumatic that's happened, and it's manifested into like being a passenger in a car, because I definitely don't have it when I'm driving. Like I'm NASCAR, when I drive, but when I'm out of the realm of having that control as a passenger, it definitely like comes and goes, and it hits me like in the worst inconvenient times, like when I'm trying to have fun on vacation. It's probably stress related, and you know, I didn't really think about my anxiety in the car as being a post-traumatic stress disorder. I just thought of it as like this new fear that had become a part of me, you know, like suddenly I'm scared of being a passenger. And, you know, as I started digging deeper, I thought, wow, you know, this is really something I need to like unpack, get to the root of it, figure out what's causing, come to terms with that. And that way I can heal and grow and not be like a horrible passenger. Because, you know, I'm a nuisance to others.
Oh, yes, she is, because she rides with me and I'll be driving along and she goes, or something, and it makes me jerk at the wheel, you know, because...
And then there's me with nausea of being a passenger in a car, and she's like, and I'm like, ugh.
I'm probably not helping with your nausea because, you know. Yeah. But, you know, it's interesting. I was reading some fun facts about, well, not really fun facts, but statistics. Recovery Village, therecoveryvillage.com. I'm sorry. They had some facts about, you know, adults and just people in general. 1 to 13 people will develop PTSD at some point in their life. So 70% of adults experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. I mean, I want to know like those 30% people that don't have any.
That's interesting.
And I have to wonder if they did and they just don't recognize that
they don't admit it.
They don't admit that that's what it was.
Right.
Or they don't realize that's what it was.
Well, yeah, and that the realization thing is interesting because I remember when I first moved out here, well, not first, when I moved out here the second time and I was working at my current job. It was my first year. And I was getting to know a coworker, and we were talking about our parents, and she asked me about my parents, and I told her that both my parents had died, and I was actually like in the room next to my dad when he died, and I had made the decision because my mom couldn't to pull the plug and everything like that, and she started talking about trauma and stuff like that. And I didn't realize it at the time that, yes, that was a trauma. I didn't think of it that way. I always thought of like trauma would be like me being beaten up.
Right.
Or something like that.
Something very violent.
Yeah. But witnessing my father's death, being in the room with him and witnessing my mom have a stroke and having to take her to the hospital, like those things are very traumatic. And I started thinking about it that, you know, this is something that I haven't dealt with yet, that this is a traumatic experience. And I don't like to go to my hometown because it reminds me of my parents.
Right.
Yeah. So when you look at those figures, so 70% of adults that experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime, 20% of people who experience a traumatic event will develop PTSD. That's out of 100 people, if 70 people had a traumatic experience, that means 14 of those people out of 100 will have PTSD. Which means that...
Which could manifest in a lot of different ways.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily...
PTSD, you know, is something that can hinder your ability to function.
Yeah.
For some. And some people can still go on and have, you know, a life, you know, that's fitting and go about their business. But, you know, some of the symptoms are ones that can make it very challenging to cope with other people, you know, around other people, or, you know, even sometimes like holding a job.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about like the, you know, memories or, you know, revisiting those memories or having to like avoid a place. you know, that can make it really challenging, you know, especially Amber with like all your family, you know, living in Vernon. It puts you in like uncomfortable position. But
Right.
sometimes people have like angry outbursts.
Yes.
Or have problems with like substance abuse.
People who have had sexual abuse and things like that have intimacy problems often.
Or destructive behavior.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, destructive of property, oneself, other people. Yeah. So.
Or they're immobilized. There are people who have PTSD who become immobilized by their fear and anxiety.
Yeah. Because they're trying to like avoid things, and then they start avoiding more things and more things. And it's interesting because I don't think a lot of times we notice it's happening until it's like gone down a path that's sometimes branches off into something else, and then you're just like, how did I get here, you know? Like with me, like I think I'm pretty sure I know like what caused the fear. I was at the fair, and I got on a I don't even know what to describe this ride. It's like a big circle, a ring, a track, and you sit down.
Super loop?
Yeah, it's kind of like that, and it goes like just in a circle, so you go upside down. And my seat like malfunctioned while we were upside down, and like there was like the over the shoulder part like ejected, you know, it came released.
Oh yeah, this wasn't a fair, to be clear. This is like a traveling carnival.
No, this was the State Fair of Texas.
Oh, I thought this happened at one of those little things.
No, this was the State Fair of Texas.
Okay,
and
never mind.
Crystal and I were riding the ride, and she was sitting across from me so she could see me, and that also was scary because then it validated like it wasn't just me like overreacting, like she saw it too, and there was nothing we could do because she was like tied down to her seat, and we were too far apart to even like, she couldn't even like hold my hand.
Right.
And so the shoulder harness like let go, but the buckle was still there, like the seatbelt buckle holding it down. But you know, I'm thinking every time I go upside down, like my weight is just gonna like rip it out, you know, and I'm gonna go falling, and then I'm gonna be at the bottom, and then the train thing's gonna go and like drive over me, you know, like this ride was, you know, like a minute, you know, it's a fair, you pay like a bajillion tickets to get on a ride that lasts like a few seconds.
Yeah.
But it immediately happened, like as soon as we got to the top, my seatbelt like malfunctioned, and then the ride just never ended, and it was horrible. It was terrifying. And
those state fair rides are scary. I won't get on them.
they are kind of rickety, and I've been on like one or two rides since then. Raina really loves it. There's a crazy ride, you know, it took me like 10 years and I got on a ride, and like, you know, 10 years later almost, and I got on, I guess it wasn't 10 years, maybe like 8 or 7 or 6 years, but we got on a fair ride, and I was like screaming bloody murder the whole time, and she just thought it was really funny, but it was just like a kiddie roller coaster, but I like about lost my mind. You know, and it kind of branched off into other things, like not being able to like get on the slide at the water park and other things.
Those could be pretty scary too. The last time I got on one of those slides, it was when we went to the water park together several years ago. I was screaming bloody murder going down that slide.
Yeah. and I actually like made myself get on it because I was like, I gotta like push past this. Like, look at all these people having fun. I don't see people dying.
And you used to enjoy those things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I used to
funny.
enjoy like jumping on the trampoline, but
like
now
as a kid, you enjoy those things, and as an adult you become more cautious about it.
Yeah. And so
it's like me and my horror movies, you know.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't roller skate or anything, you know, and even riding my bike, when it starts getting really too fast, I like panic. And so I think like when I really started like asking myself like, why, when, and like really like going backwards and trying to figure out like when the first time I was like really scared, And then I was like, I think that might be it, because shortly after that, I was in a car accident.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like boom, 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 like a bunch of series of things happened. And I was also having like other stressful things in my life that were happening that were not related, but I was under like intense
compounded
stress.
the stress. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I didn't drive for like 2 years after that, because I was trying to deal with like this issue with my driver's license, which also like made me really depressed and stressed. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to drive anymore until I can get like my license reinstated and get, this, license registration fee paid off, because I drove without my license too many times. I got too many tickets, and then it was just like, okay, no more driving. And then, so then I was not driving, no control. My life felt like it was a little out of control. And I had like a traumatic incident happen to me, and it like manifested into every time I get in the car, it's going to crash. And I'm getting better. My husband still doesn't drive. Whenever we ride in the car together, he knows. He just give me the keys. He's so like accustomed to that now. Like
he gives the keys to me.
He went to like give my mom a ride, and he was like, "Here, you drive." So, and my family knows. Like, I appreciate my family for just accepting me for who I am and just letting me like work through it.
I mean, I think that's an important thing with PTSD is that first off, recognizing that that's what it is. But, but a lot of historically, we talked about the stigma behind it and stuff. A lot of times, like if a child had PTSD from falling off their bike or falling off a horse, which happened to me, things like that, their parents would tell them, buck up, get back on the bike, ride, tough it up, be a man to the boys, whatever. Big girls don't cry, things like that. And not realizing that actually does further damage. You have to
because now you're ignoring it instead of acknowledging it.
And a lot of people would like gaslight those people, like egg them on to, because they knew it triggered them, thinking that they were trying to help them get over it or whatever, but it just actually makes it worse.
So like when my grandma used to take Ashley through the car wash.
Yes.
Every weekend. We were like, she didn't need
terrified.
to wash her car, but my cousin was like 3,
terrified
4, 5,
of the
and
car
she
wash.
Just scream.
Bloody murder. She was screaming.
My grandma thought, she was helping by, we're going to go get our car.
Desensitizing.
Yeah. By just continually doing it. Yeah.
But it doesn't. Yeah. It just makes things worse. And I mean, there's lots of people who do that. The kid's afraid of the bike, but they make them ride the bike or whatever. And yeah.
Or like the water, like especially how I learned to swim was being thrown in the water.
My dad threw me in the deep end and said, swim to me.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying. And I still, even to this day, I can swim, but it kind of freaks me out when I
not being able to touch
the bottom or have something I can grab onto.
It's interesting too, and I think we've talked about this before. A child's perception of reality is different than an adult's.
Yes, well, even adults, your perception.
When
of
we
things
say
is...
like, and I'm definitely don't think that I'm like downplaying like what happened, because yes, parents do throw their kids in the pool and say swim, but as a child, like throwing you in the pool, that experience is different than what your parents saw you as being thrown in the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about, I'm trying to remember what episode that was where we talked about that. We talked about the episode from New Amsterdam where the girl was recalling
That's exactly
her memory.
what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And her perception of what happened, this really traumatic event, and it was completely different than what actually happened. And And
But
it
she
does.
didn't fully understand.
She didn't fully understand
Right.
because she was a child.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 4 feet deep was kind of pretty deep when you were like 5.
Right.
And 8 feet is really deep when you're 5. But now I'm like,
Oh, I don't even
It's
think
not
it was. It
deep.
wasn't even
Yeah.
8 feet. It was probably like the 5 foot deep.
yeah, because your dad
Yeah,
was probably
it was
standing in it.
definitely-
He was
yeah.
standing in it. and
It
he
was
in
my
the
aunt and
water,
uncle's pool, so it was like 5 foot.
Maybe,
for
yeah.
sure.
But
Well, see,
For
my dad
me,
was 6 foot
that was
tall,
me,
so it
so
may
like
have
a-
probably been
as
4.
a kid, it's like 20 feet deep.
Well, I'm 5
And
foot,
you got
just a little bit
tossed.
over 5 foot, you know.
Mhm.
So, like, as a little kid being like a foot or whatever, 5 feet's, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the child's perception
Perception.
of it.
But
You know.
but it was trauma nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I said, even a child falling off the bike causes trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It may not cause PTSD, but it does cause trauma because
Yeah.
it is traumatic to that child. When I was 5 years old, I was we were visiting family in Arkansas, and the family had a horse, and they decided to let us ride. And I walked along beside while my aunt rode the horse first. She's like less than 2 years older than me. And so she rode the horse. And then when it was my turn, she wanted to guide the horse or, or whatever. And so she had the reins, but I was on the horse, and the horse stepped on her foot or something. I was 5 years old, so I don't remember the exact things that happened, but I think she screamed and let go of the reins or something, and the horse got spooked and started running and ran and ran and ran and ran through the swing set trying to knock me off, and I'm hanging on for dear life, and then it finally knocked me off in a rose bush. That was very traumatic for me. I was 5 years old, and I was mad at my aunt for years because she did that. She screamed and caused the horse to, and that may not even be what happened, but it was, it didn't prevent me from getting on a horse again, but it certainly made me nervous about getting on horses.
I had such a traumatic experience the only time I've ever ice skated that I will not
Oh, yeah.
get on ice ever again. Like, I think I was in middle school, and we came out to the Galleria, and my friend Chaslyn and her friend Whitney, and then there was another girl. There were a few of us campfire girls, and they're all like, let's go ice skating. And I'm like, I've never been ice skating, but I'll try it, so, and they're like, oh, it's easy. And I have the worst balance in the world. I have busted my knee, foot, everything, arm, so many times, roller skating, whatever, walking, just being alive, dancing. I ripped the cartilage out of my knee, dancing in college. So that's another story for another time, another PTSD story for another time. But so I get out, and they're like, oh, it's so easy. Ice skating is so easy. And this is back before they have those little grip things that you can now like hold on to and ice skate with. So maybe I could get out and ice skate using one of those.
Is it like a walker?
Well, those. Have you ever been there for the little kids where they have like the walker?
Yeah, they
not.
do. Now
and
they have
older
these
people, they can
walkers.
hold on these walkers and get out and ice skate. This was way before they had those.
They have them at this regular skating rink too.
Yeah. And so I get out there, and all the people that I'm with had all been ice skating before, and they're all like, in my mind, they're all Olympic ice skaters, and everything. And I'm like staying up against the wall, but it was even like worse up against the wall. Like the ice was uneven up against the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's not skated on very often.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my friend Chaslyn and this other girl, they're all like, we're going to take you out. We're going to take you out into the ice. So they grab me and just start skating and start dragging
Pulling you,
me
yeah.
behind them. And I'm screaming the whole time.
no.
Like I was deathly scared. Like they're pulling me and swirling me around the ice. And I'm like, ah! And then they let go of me and I like fall up against the wall and I'm just like, okay, I am never ice skating ever again. I go in and sit down.
Aw.
Oh.
Yeah, so I can just remember like them like dragging me. I'm in between them and they're like skating on. It's like something I know I've seen something like this in a movie before, and I'm like screaming the whole time. Ah! Yeah.
Oh, man.
Don't ever want to ice skate. And I had a similar experience the only time I ever skied.
Oh.
Because, like I said, I have bad balance.
You know, I think that sometimes those, when we're kids, like, we don't know how to set boundaries, and kids don't know how to accept other people's boundaries.
Right.
And
Yeah, I
when
did
you're a
not want to
kid-
be dragged out.
right. And that boundary, you know, wasn't, you know, you probably might not have set the boundary quick enough. It was too late, you know,
Yeah.
and your friends might not have respected the boundary if you told
Right.
them you didn't want it. And they're like, no,
Yeah.
but you need it. It'll be fine,
Right.
you know.
Right.
I think sometimes those can cause problems when people cross the boundary, you know,
Yeah, definitely.
especially with kids. Because kids, there's the fearless kids and then the ones that aren't ready
Yeah.
on their own terms. They need to do it on their own terms.
Yeah.
To
That-
not be scared.
That happens a lot, like bullying and goading and oh, you're scared. They didn't do anything like that to me, but I've seen it happen. You know, oh, you're scared, and then I'm not scared, and then something bad happens.
Yeah.
But I mean, I won't ever ice skate again because I'm afraid I'll fall. But a lot of that, like nowadays as an adult, like skiing and ice skating and skating in general, I do things with more caution
Well,
now
oh,
that
yeah.
I've
Well,
hurt
I
my
think-
knee and ripped all the
I think
cartilage out of my
that's
knee.
something that naturally happens as you get older because you become aware of your own mortality and your own.
Yeah, you
know,
think you're
when you're-
invincible until you break something, and then
Yeah.
you're not invincible anymore, and you're
Right.
like, "Oh, I don't have any cartilage in my knee, and my knee hurts all the time, so I shouldn't go up this ladder or
I'm
you
not
know,
gonna-
whatever."
I'm not going to go ice skating because I don't want to fall on that knee or what.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, Travis
So-
got rollerblades one year for Christmas, like maybe like the first year we started dating, and he hadn't really gone out and tried them out until one day him and Raina both, they were gonna go skate. You know, Raina got roller skates, but she'd never used them either. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't show her how to skate with your skates on. So I was walking her around
Oh yeah.
with her skates, you know, showing her how to get them going. Because I feel like roller skates and roller blades are a little bit
Two
different.
different things.
Yeah.
Different,
And
yeah.
Travis was over there skating, and I was watching him, and I was just like, what if he falls and breaks his wrist or breaks his foot? He will not be able to go to work or drive and take Rainer to school.
Yeah.
And that will be very challenging for us, you know, financially. You know, he's the one
Yeah.
who cooks dinner. How is he going to cook dinner with one hand?
Mm-hmm.
And like all these like rational thoughts in my mind of reasons why he shouldn't be
Yeah.
skating came to mind, because
Well-
this man was already 40 at
Well,
that point.
Well,
But
you
it's
can't
not
be like live
rational.
life. You can't
yeah,
be
you
like
can't
that
live your life in
cautious
fear.
and
No,
be
but
in fear of.
I'm looking at, he hadn't been on skates in like 20 years.
Right. And
And
he
he was
probably
like-
needed wrist and elbow pads.
He didn't have a
Yeah.
helmet on or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And he's like, I bet I can do some tricks. And I'm like,
No.
when's the last time you skated first?
Yeah.
That's like Jason. He's all like, I can rollerblade. And because we ran across my roller derby skates because I used to skate a lot when I was younger. I hadn't skated over 20 years now, but I had roller derby skates, not like roller blades. I've never been able to do roller blades or anything
Yeah.
like that, but I could skate with the best of them. And he's like, we should go skating. And I'm like, yeah, does 40-year-olds go skating? And, I mean, I've seen, old lady skate, but it was just like funny to me. I'm like, I'm not putting these skates on anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't think I could do it. I'm afraid I'm going to bust my knee. And what did I do the other day outside of work? I busted my knee and I've been hobbling around.
I've done that a few times lately
like a
myself.
big black bruise down my leg. And now I walk more cautiously.
Yeah.
It was raining and there was a grate and it was downtown, slick streets. Yeah, now I'm like, no, I don't want to walk on a grate. Which
Right.
Avoiding grates in downtown Dallas is
It's a challenge.
a
And
challenge.
they're big too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they take up like the whole sidewalk. So it's just like, well, man,
Yeah.
how am I not going to slip? And now it's like every grade I see, I'm going to slip because I slipped that one time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get over it eventually.
Prolonged
Then
exposure.
slip again.
Prolonged exposure. That's a type of treatment for PTSD.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
just continue to walk on the grates in my slick Vans that I wear to work.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about that either. Yeah, keep practicing slipping on the grates.
Yeah, we're talking about some of our, like, I want to call them minor PTSD.
Oh, sure.
Kristen's obviously is not minor because
No.
it affects her daily life.
Yeah.
Our fear of skating or whatever, those are things, they're not life impacting
Yeah,
at all, really.
I don't really have anything that affects my daily life anymore, day to day. Like,
Yeah, I
well, maybe I do.
I have some things that have happened to me in my past that kind of do, but they're
like kinda, not like
I've kind of grown through them, I guess, but yeah, I just I think a lot about people that I know, friends and stuff that have bigger forms. I say bigger forms of PTSD. People who've been through traumatic car accidents, or who lost a loved one suddenly, and the PTSD that causes, things like that can affect your everyday life.
Victims of crime.
Victims of crimes. And that's actually one that I had for a while that kind of, I've kind of grown through it or learned, I was a victim of people. I'm not sure exactly what it was, whether it was a prank or what, but when Kristen was a baby, my ex-husband and I lived in a little duplex, and the duplex, the other half of our duplex was empty at the time, and the attic entry into this whole building was in this other duplex, the other apartment, and someone went up in the roof, in the ceiling, and was over the top of our.
This is like really freaking me out.
Yeah, it was weird.
I don't even.
You
know
don't
what
remember
you're
this
talking
story.
about,
Yeah,
but this is you're giving me like the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, but there was somebody who went across from the one duplex side into, not the duplex we lived in Lubbock, you and me and Mark. This was me and Chuck when you were a baby.
Oh yeah, that's way before my memories.
Yeah, you have no memory of it. But they were walking around and stuff, and then like another time, this happened like over the course of a week, and there were several different incidents. And one of the other things was I woke up in the middle of the night because you woke up and you were hungry, and you had a separate bedroom, and I went into your room, and we had a full-size bed in there, and I would just lay down in the bed to breastfeed you, and the light was on, and I was laying in the bed feeding you, and someone was outside the window that was over the bed, and they called out my name. And so that's why we think it was somebody trying to play a prank on us or something. But it was freaky, and I froze. It just made me so freaky weird. And it took me a long time to get up out of the bed and Chuck was sound asleep in the other room. I think he remembered hearing the people in the attic, and he did have a little handgun, and he kind of looked around and tried to investigate, but there was like tapping on the windows and stuff, and it freaked me out for a long time, and they never did anything to us. It was just like kind of meant to scare us, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling like I could never be at home alone in the dark.
Because what if it wasn't somebody playing a joke? Yeah.
Right. And even long years later, when you were like school age and things, I did not like being at home alone. And when Mark first started doing Boy Scouts, going camping with the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and stuff like that, it was so difficult for me to be at home alone without someone here with me, because
those are things that can be debilitating.
Yes.
Because if you're not able to live on your own, you have to have somebody live with you.
Right. And it took me a long time to get past that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with it now. I mean, I'm totally okay with being at home alone now. But early on, even in this house, I mean, still, it was challenging for me to be at home alone. And I would have to do things to make myself fall asleep and to cover up outside noises so I couldn't hear things outside or whatever. And I still wake up to noises. I hear noises and I'm like, is that somebody in the house? Is that somebody outside my window? And that's like a huge fear of mine, that there's going to be somebody outside the window trying to get in or something like that. And that's I mean, like I said, I've kind of grown through it and I'm learning to deal with it, but that's a trauma nonetheless. And
that was like 40 years ago.
Yeah. And it still affects me to some extent. So
that's crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I didn't.
I don't talk about it often. And like I say, it doesn't really bother me unless I'm at home alone, and at night. And it's just kind of, it's kind of hit or miss. Most of the time it doesn't bother me at all, but every once in a while I'll still be triggered by a sound.
And you know what? That's where I wonder, like, sometimes the triggers, I think you're more susceptible to be triggered when you're under stress than just randomly being triggered, because I can get in the car and ride in the car with people, and focus on other things, but I bet you when I'm under stress, it's harder.
That's worse. Yeah. It could be. That could very well be. And there's a lot of things that cause those stress, not just work stress or whatever, lack of sleep and things like
absolutely,
that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who suffer from PTSD have, or some of those people, I will say a lot of people, have substance abuse issues. They use those substances initially to treat the PTSD, to help the symptoms subside. But over time, what happens is the substance abuse causes the PTSD to come back more often and worse. So I've seen that quite a bit in, with people that I've known and stuff. So that can be a problem too.
So I was watching something. I wish I could remember what it was. Probably something about psychedelics and research on like the use of psychedelics for things beyond like recreational use and illegal use. That they were using ecstasy or MDMA for PTSD, and I found that really interesting. So, say for instance, someone who is suffering like an experience that they traumatic event, they will have them recite, the traumatic event, and then they'll have them take the MDMA, which causes literally what it is. It gives you like this
euphoria, yeah,
feeling. And so then while they're under the influence of the MDMA, they're feeling euphoria, and then they're going through that experience again. And so it actually like changes,
rewires your
their
brain.
brain,
Yeah.
so that, you know, that traumatic event isn't as traumatic. It's interesting because it does rewire your brain. So I want to know more like about like what the repercussions of that are, because then you're actually desensitizing yourself to something that could potentially be like horrible, you know. But it helps those people cope with, so when they do end up going through that traumatic experience, like when they have flashback or, you know, relapse into that like repetitious memory, then it's not as bad, because their brain is slowly like training to be not as upset.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting.
That is interesting.
The different, I mean, and those are like super dangerous, you know, drugs that are like under like microdose controlled, you know. So it's really interesting though, like where they've coming with, you know, the science and treatment, because even just like 40 years ago, the way that they treated people for PTSD was like put them in an insane asylum.
Sometimes, yeah.
So I'm really curious where they take it now that they're really recognizing that it's not just a certain type of person that has PTSD, and that even children get it.
For
you know,
what we think of as small things.
And then it starts earlier. It's not just something that happens as an adult, but that those very mundane, almost seeming things that happen to every kid as a rite of passage, you know, those can be things that cause PTSD. And how can we navigate through those tricky waters to prevent PTSD by addressing traumatic events differently?
Right.
Like it makes me
recognizing
think,
when something is a traumatic
makes me
event.
think about everything that I say and do as a parent.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it does. It really does. Because even small things that you say to a child, if they're perceived differently by the child, they can cause, you know, it's true. It really is. And we've talked about this before too, about, you know, I have some issues with, you know, weight and body image things, you know, that started back when I was in high school from, people, you know, a band director calling us thunder thighs. My dad called me bubble butt. He was being affectionate about it, but I felt like I had a big butt because I have a big butt, you know, but it gave me body image issues.
Yeah.
And that have stuck with me for the rest of my entire life, you know.
Yeah.
And people don't realize the things that they do. And I'm sure I did. I said and did things to my kids that, you know, and I've said this repeatedly on this podcast. If I did things to you, know that I wasn't trying to hurt you, because I never would want to hurt you. It was
when we talked about generational trauma before on the podcast too, like your mother did to you that you may have done to Kristen.
Right.
Like my grandmother did to my mom, that my mom did to me, that I would be afraid to do to my child, because I definitely grew up with body image issues. I couldn't wear a skirt for a really long time because every time I wore a skirt, my grandmother would tell me how ugly I looked in one.
Yeah.
How fat I looked in a skirt.
And it makes you wonder what traumatic event happened to her to
her.
make her think that way.
Right.
That, yeah.
That it's a trickle down of PTSD, because then that gives you trauma.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think that I look ugly in dresses and skirts, and now dresses are one of my most favorite things to wear. But used to, when I was young, every time I'd wear a dress or a skirt, I'd get told how ugly and fat I looked in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, as a child, was often told because I had a very straight posture. Being in band, you're taught to sit on the edge of your chair, sit up straight, put your shoulders back. And I remember repeatedly my mother telling me, quit sticking your boobs out. Quit sticking and I was like, I'm not sticking my boobs out. I've got my shoulders back. I had really nice posture. And because she berated me over it so much, I started slumping so that she wouldn't yell at me about it. And then I had terrible posture. And, where did that come from? Why? I'm not sure why she thought that, but, it is.
That's a really interesting thought on women having terrible posture and slumping to kind of hide themselves.
Yeah.
Who made them feel like they need to be hidden?
Yeah.
And why did
I
that
have
person
horrible
feel
posture? And it's
opposed to
because
it?
I sit a certain way to hide my body, to hunch down and hide my body. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Which is funny, so irrational. What are we hiding behind?
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing to hide.
Right.
Like we're here, and the boobs
I was
are
born with
sticking
this.
out.
I have what I have.
Yeah.
Belly sticking out. I don't used to, when I would go places in public or wherever, I wouldn't sit comfortably. I wouldn't sit stretched back, because then that would make my stomach stick out more. I would sit on the edge of my seat and kind of bend over and hunch down a little bit to make my stomach look smaller.
Yeah. And see, it's kind of weird to me because I was talking about my dad calling me bubble butt and the band director saying that I had thunder thighs. I actually was very small. I was very slim.
Yeah, and see, any teacher would get in trouble.
Oh my gosh!
Today for even telling a kid that they had
I probably
thunder
weighed
thighs.
115 pounds or so. So it's not like I was fat, overweight. I don't know what the point of calling those things were. It didn't give me anorexia. I didn't have bulimia or anything, but it certainly gave me a lot of issues about my body image and feeling like I was fat. And when I got older as an adult, I would limit what I ate and, was always dieting to try to, make my body look different than it did. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't overweight. So I don't, it's the things that happen to us, they just stick with us. And even still, I get triggered by things, if somebody says something, if my husband said something about my weight, it would just fly all over me. And you were talking about emotional outbursts or whatever.
Yeah.
That was me. If he said anything about my weight, I just exploded. And, it's because of that. Because I was traumatized by those comments when I was a teenager. When I didn't even have a reason for someone to say those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both of... And, yeah, my grandma definitely did it to my mom also, because my mom was maybe a size 10 at the most. She was a cheerleader, and Oh, and then my mom seemed to be on a diet my whole life until she
Oh, my mom was too.
like decided that she wasn't, and then she was just gonna eat whatever. But when I was younger, I remember her always going to Weight Watchers and always drinking Slim Fast shakes. And my grandma was the same way. My grandma was like a size 4. Like, she was skinny. My grandma exercised all the time. That's probably why she's 100, you know what I mean? Like, that's probably why.
Yeah.
She ate salad. That was the only thing she ate when I was younger. And she exercised. My grandma exercised all the time. And my grandma, you know, being a size 4, and my mom, you know, being a size 10, size 12, you know, I guess, you know, if you're a size 4, you want your child to be a size 4.
Yeah.
And so then my mom
And
being like a size
and
10,
not realizing,
12, and then I'm like a size 18.
and not
so
realizing
you
that
want your
the
child to
thing
be
that you're doing to try to make your child be slimmer, more healthy, is actually what's causing them
Yeah.
to gain that weight.
I
Yeah.
was put through every diet imaginable
from
when I
both
was a
sides
kid.
of my family too. Like,
Yeah, like my
I didn't
grandmother.
make you diet.
no, but Mimi
yeah.
My
was
grandma,
always
Mama.
encouraging it.
Oh yeah, I remember her giving you the Richard Simmons diet
when I
to
was
follow.
like 12.
Yeah. Here, follow this diet. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would go over to my other side of the family and get, concerns about my weight there,
My grandma took me to get my ear stapled because it was a fad
Oh, yeah, I
saying
remember
that
when that
like it
happened.
would curb appetites. And this peddler came through Vernon stapling
Oh,
people's
yeah.
ears.
It happened in Lubbock too. I think my sister-in-law did that at one
Yeah,
point.
and my grandma, I think I was in like 5th grade.
Oh, actually, I think hers
I
was
was
to
young.
quit smoking though. Yeah.
I was young, and my grandma took me to get my ear stapled because she thought I was too fat. And then my grandma took me to a hypnotist to get me to stop eating. Like, I'm surprised I didn't get sent to fat camp. If they even had fat camp in the area that I grew up in. That's one thing that they didn't do, and I saw the Heavyweights movie when I was a kid. You know, that's one thing that didn't happen to me was get sent to fat camp. I did go to band camp this one time, but I didn't go to fat camp.
But that stuff sticks with you. Yeah. And like I said, they think they're helping, but sometimes that's what makes
I grew up hating lettuce and salad because my grandma tried to make me eat it every meal. And now I'll eat spinach salad, but I will not eat iceberg lettuce. Yeah. And my mom was the same way. She hated lettuce because I guarantee you my grandma did that to her too.
Yeah.
And my cousin Stephanie hates lettuce. Guarantee you know why, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think the big takeaway from this is to recognize that sometimes the things that cause trauma are not things that they're not necessarily the big things like a car wreck or a something violent happening.
Yeah, it could be anything.
It could be anything, and to recognize traumatic stress when it happens, recognize it for what it is, and try to avoid causing that trauma in the first place, but then recognizing that it has occurred, and getting people the help they needed. Because if maybe instead of always pushing us to lose weight or whatever, if they had realized that there was a trauma there that needed to be addressed, that might have fixed the problem to start with.
Or if, like they had just let us do it naturally. Like, I think like the whole diet culture and the whole forcing all of that kind of like, I know sent me in the opposite direction when I was younger. Because when I got out on my own and lived on my own,
You just wanted
I'm
to eat
like,
what you want to eat.
I can eat pizza. I can
I'm
eat
free.
ramen.
Yeah.
And we would, when we were in college, like we would go to buffets and get corn dogs and make all this food and stuff like that.
Yep.
Like, it was just, it was just like a free thing. Like I can drink whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. And it's kind of like with the hair and stuff like that. I think that was the last podcast episode we were talking about that. Like I went off and got all kinds of piercings and dyed my hair, all the things that I couldn't do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think, like I said, I was really skinny until I was an adult, but, my eating and my weight gain came from that being a way of dealing with other kinds of trauma. I ate to soothe other traumas. And I think if I had gotten help at that point, like psychological help or whatever, and found healthier ways to deal with those other issues that were going on, I probably would not have gained weight. I don't know, my situation with the weight is a little bit different than y'all's because y'all were both much, much younger than me when you gained your weight. And, but I do find that most people who have eating disorders or who are, have weight problems, there is some sort of trauma involved in their life that causes them to eat that way. They're addressing something. It is a form of substance abuse. The substance just happens to be food. And so instead of,
because it was restricted from me.
Right.
So then I grew up to become a binge eater because it was restricted and hidden and locked away from me.
Right. And I think my reason for turning to food as that was because of the trauma of growing up so poor that we sometimes didn't have food and other things that happened during my childhood. And so I turned to food as a comfort because that was the one thing I never had while all that trauma was going on.
So it's experiencing a luxury.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I turned to food and
Like I'm going to treat myself.
I'm going to treat myself and make myself feel better. And then it just became, like somebody who drinks. They, maybe they have a glass of wine to relax themselves after a really bad day at work. But after you've had so many bad days at work and you're drinking a glass of wine every day, that becomes a problem, and I've seen that happen over and over and over again, that one beer or that one glass of wine or that one cocktail after work becomes, I have to have 2 or 3 every day. And then on the weekends, I'm going to get smashed, because that's how I deal with my trauma. And that's, we do that with food. We do that with all kinds of things. So recognizing that trauma before it gets to that point and getting the help and stop stigmatizing it, recognize that mental illness is, I don't want to say normal, but it is.
It can affect anybody.
It can affect anybody. It's not a weakness. It's not.
I don't think I know anybody that has never at some point in their life had some kind of trauma or some kind of mental stress.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
It really is normal. Like it's human.
It is.
It's human to have stress and
part
anxiety.
of the human condition.
It is.
Our brains are totally not perfect computers.
Yeah.
Right. And so recognizing that it is, there's, it's not something to be shameful. It's ashamed of. It's not a weakness. It's not something you have to hide, and getting help when you need it. That's important. It's really important. So
I think
Absolutely.
like a lot of people became aware of that during COVID
Yeah.
when when everybody was home with their own thoughts. It
Yeah.
was just it was
That
kind
was
of
very
like a
traumatic for a lot of
global
people.
awakening.
Actually, honestly, COVID itself and like the lockdown itself is a traumatic
It is a
experience.
traumatic
yeah, not
experience.
being able
There
to
are still people who are having issues.
social anxiety
Social
from
anxiety.
being locked up so long.
Yes.
And that, I mean, I experienced that for the
And
longest
the
time.
sudden
like
changes.
going
Yeah.
to the grocery store and having like a ton of people there.
Yeah.
Like going to anywhere and having a ton of people there. Like for a really long time, I think I'm just now really getting
Right.
over the
Yeah.
anxiety of having a bunch of people around.
I know a lot of
I
people
still
who
can't
don't go
to-
grocery shop. They order and get their food delivered, and they just don't want to go anywhere.
Like I can't. I remember. I went to last year. Went to Scarborough Fair for the first time since before COVID, and it was so packed and so crowded, and there were so many people. And I was walking through there, and I was just like, this used to be my favorite thing. Like going to festivals and going to places with a lot of people and people watching used to be my favorite thing. But I don't even really care to want to be out here in the hot, even though I love this kind of thing. But there are just way too many people.
I feel the same way. When I get around, if I hear somebody cough in public, my first thought is, oh God, I hope they don't have COVID. Seriously.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I want to stay away
This
from
time
that
of year,
person.
it's horrible because allergies.
I don't want to be near that person. Please turn away. Please get away from me. That's the way I feel. It's a trigger. And I don't know how long it'll be before I'm over that.
I can still.
I mean, I never wanted
still
people
think
to
about
cough
it,
on me before, but now
now you're just hyper aware of there's diseases in the world and they kill people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hyper
everybody
aware.
is more hyper aware. But I mean, before COVID, I still carried hand sanitizer with me, and I still tried not to cough, and I still stayed away from people that cough. But now, I am more hyper aware of people coughing around me.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't cover their mouth.
Oh, they don't. There's still a lot of people who don't. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Yeah.
This is how COVID happened.
Yeah.
Wash your hands, cover your mouth.
So I know that, like our topic, it's a really heavy topic, and it, for those of you that do have PTSD or know someone that's suffering from it, it can feel like a big, heavy burden or something that's like impossible to overcome. But, definitely encourage you, to seek out, guidance.
Yes.
Speak to someone about it. That took so much weight off of my chest the first time. Like I really expressed this is weird, but this is what's going on with me, and then it was like, oh, that's normal. Okay. I'm having, PTSD from something, and being able to have someone help me explore why really took a big weight off of my chest and helped me understand myself a little bit better and have a little bit of hope that there's a better outlook.
Right.
Definitely encourage, if you know someone who might be suffering from PTSD, to talk to someone, anyone. Professional help's always the best. Yeah. But I mean, I feel like this kind of jumps into our next topic for next week.
Mm-hmm. So I read Brene Brown's Rising Strong, which is a book about being at the bottom, being traumatic things happening to you or whatever, and coming back with a vengeance, coming back stronger than you were before. And she talks a lot about trauma and things like that. And I'm really excited to talk about this book. It was very interesting, and I know you guys haven't read it, but we can talk about some of the talking points, and hopefully you can give your input and go from there.
I'm really excited because we had our episode where Amber had read Girl Wash Your Face.
Yes.
And I had not read that book, and I still haven't, but I took away so much from that episode. I felt like that was one of my favorite episodes that we did because we just really
there's just so much going on in that book. We could probably do another episode on it, honestly.
I'm excited, that where this episode can go because it sounds like a really interesting book.
It was. It definitely was. So,
So be sure to come back next week. So, and then of course, definitely check us out on MMC Chat on our Facebook group if you want to chat with us there. Sometimes we have polls and, little topics that we discuss there. And then of course, our website with the blog is modernmusings.net. So definitely be on the lookout and check us out there.
And if you're looking for a way to journal your trauma or do some
shadow work
or anything like that, you should check out the link on our website for our we have self-published some Words Have Power journals. That's what they're called. And we've got several different aesthetics there for you to look at, and we'd love for you to
Is
check
there a
those out.
goth one?
There is. There is like a grayish black one. Yes, there is a goth one.
Yes, there is. So, check out those.
All the aesthetics.
Check out those links for
Pink
that.
goth,
And
purple goth. No,
that's called pastel goth.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, you need to listen to our last episode because we talked about all things goth.
That's right. So,
all right. Well, we look forward to our discussion next week. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.